It was a night that no one was supposed to know about. A night when emotions, secrets, and boundaries blurred. The story begins in the quiet hours after midnight, when the city had fallen asleep and the only sounds outside were the faint hum of cars and the distant rhythm of rain. Demet Özdemir was in her hotel room, exhausted after a long day of filming, when a knock on her door shattered the silence. It was 2 a.m. She didn't expect anyone. But when she looked through the peephole, her heart skipped a beat. Standing there, in the dim corridor light, was Yaman. She hesitated for a moment. They hadn't spoken for weeks. There had been tension, rumors, and misunderstandings that seemed impossible to fix. Yet there he was, tired, emotional, and clearly determined. When she opened the door, his first words were quiet but heavy. "We need to talk." She stepped aside, letting him in. The room was dimly lit by a bedside lamp, and for a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was louder than any argument they'd ever had. Demet crossed her arms and finally broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "It's late." "I couldn't sleep," Ken replied, his voice low and sincere. "I've been thinking about everything. About us. About how it all went wrong." He looked exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. His eyes carried the kind of pain that words can't disguise. Demet sighed and sat down on the edge of the bed. "We already talked about this," she said. "We both needed space." But deep down, she knew this wasn't about space. It was about closure. Or maybe, the lack of it. Ken walked closer, his voice trembling slightly. "I can't stand the silence anymore," he said. "Every time I try to move on, something pulls me back. Every place I go, every city, every project, it's like you're still there." She looked at him, speechless. It wasn't the first time he had said something heartfelt, but this time it was different. There was desperation in his tone. A man who had fought too long against something he couldn't erase. "Ken," she said carefully, "you can't keep doing this to yourself. To both of us." He shook his head. "You don't understand. I tried to forget. I tried everything. But when I heard what you said in that interview, He paused, unable to finish the sentence. Demet frowned. "What interview?" He looked up at her, eyes glossy under the lamplight. "You said that some people stay in your heart even if they're not in your life anymore. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" His voice cracked slightly on the last words. She froze. She had said that, casually, during a promotional interview, never thinking it would reach him. But now, standing before her, she realized that her words had reopened an old wound. "I meant it in general," she whispered, trying to calm him. "It wasn't about you." "Don't lie," he said quietly, a faint, sad smile crossing his face. "You know exactly what you meant. And I know it too." For a moment, they just stared at each other. The air between them was heavy, filled with years of shared memories, arguments, laughter, and unsaid words. "Why are you here, Ken?" she asked finally. He looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I needed to see you. Because I couldn't sleep knowing that you might have felt the same way I do and never said it." She stood up, moving to the window, looking out into the night. "And what if I do?" she said softly, almost to herself. "What difference would it make? Too much has happened." He walked closer. "It would make all the difference in the world," he said. "Because I never stopped caring." Demet turned around slowly, her eyes meeting his. There was a long pause. Neither of them knew what to say. Years of emotion seemed to collapse into that one moment, two people who had tried to move on, only to realize that the past was still very much alive. "You should go," she whispered finally, her voice trembling. "I can't," he said firmly. "Not tonight. Not until you tell me the truth." "What truth?" she asked, her heartbeat quickening. He took a step closer. "That you still think about me. That you still feel something when you hear my name." Demet looked down, her eyes glistening. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said. "It matters to me," he replied softly. "Because you're the only thing that still feels real." The room went silent again. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping gently against the window. Ken stood there, motionless, waiting for an answer. But none came. Minutes turned into hours. He sat down, his head in his hands, while Demet remained by the window, lost in thought. The night stretched endlessly between them, filled with everything they wanted to say but couldn't. When dawn finally began to break, the light creeping through the curtains, Demet turned around. "You should leave," she said again, her voice breaking this time. "You can't stay here." He looked up, his eyes red from exhaustion and emotion. "If I leave now, I'll never come back," he said. "Are you sure that's what you want?" She hesitated. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. He stood up slowly, walked toward the door, and paused with his hand on the handle. "I just want you to know," he said quietly, "I came here tonight because I couldn't keep pretending that I'm fine. But if you tell me to go, I'll go." Demet looked at him one last time. "Goodbye, Can." He nodded, his eyes filled with tears. "Goodbye." The door closed softly behind him, leaving the room silent once again. She sat down on the bed, her chest tightening with a mix of relief and pain. She had done the right thing, or at least, that's what she told herself. But when she heard the elevator door close moments later, a tear finally slipped down her cheek. Outside, the city was waking up. People were starting their day, unaware that somewhere in a quiet hotel, two people had just closed a chapter that had defined both of their lives. Later, that same day, a journalist asked Yaman about the rumors. "Did you really visit her that night?" He smiled faintly, avoiding the question. "Some truths," he said, "don't need to be explained." His answer only deepened the mystery, and fans began to piece together the timeline. Who had called whom? What exactly happened in that room? Was it closure, or a beginning disguised as an ending? Days later, Demet was seen arriving at the airport, sunglasses hiding her expression. When asked about the rumors, she simply said, "Sometimes people come back, not to stay, but to say goodbye." Her words were enough to set social media on fire again. Because now, the story was no longer just about a late-night visit, it was about two souls still connected by something neither of them could name. In the end, the truth was exactly as the title suggested, finally revealed, but not completely understood. He came to her hotel at 2 a.m. and refused to leave, not because of pride or anger, but because some goodbyes need to be said face to face. And as he walked out into the breaking dawn, he knew that part of him would never leave that room. Because no matter where life took them, new countries, new projects, new loves, that night would remain, like an unfinished sentence, echoing silently between them forever. Even months later, that night still haunted them both. Ken admitted in a later interview that he hadn't planned the visit. "I just followed my heart," he said softly. Demet, on the other hand, never denied it happened. "Some moments," she told a friend, "are too honest to regret." Fans continued to speculate that what happened that night was the final closure they both needed, but those who know them believe it was something more, a quiet confession of love that could never find its right time. Because sometimes, love doesn't end with goodbye, it simply learns how to live in silence.